real conversations, and some hard truths. Gangs, drugs, and guns. Giving a voice to those willing to sacrifice. We have stories that need to be told. We have lessons that need to be taught. Protect and serve. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. All right, welcome back, everybody. Nathan Romas with you once again. And today we're going to be working on some current events in law enforcement. And for that, we brought in our federal partner again, Brian Sauve, president of the National Police Federation. So welcome, Brian.
Oh, good afternoon, Nathan.
This is your third appearance on here. So you were in season 1, episode 4 and episode 29, if people want to go back and listen to some of the updates you were giving along the way. I'm glad we could kind of keep the relationship going and get you in here. And, people love hearing the current events and what's happening with you, especially being the largest police service in Canada. So today we're going to cover a few different things and we'll see where we get to with them. But just for the listeners, so they're kind of have an idea of where we're going with this. One of the things we're going to talk about was the Mass Casualty Commission, which was the response to the 2020 Nova Scotia mass murder of 22 people. The Casualty Commission looked to provide clarity around the causes and context that led to some of the murders. And they made a bunch of recommendations, or will be making recommendations to help keep people safe in the future. With this commission, the NPF was a formal participant and has 28 of their own recommendations that they're going to be putting out. So we're going to cover off some of that. We're also going to talk a bit about recruiting. There's been some changes to the RCMP's experienced officer applicant process. And we'll also get onto some bail reform and just where things are with the so-called strengthening of the bail system. So anywhere you'd like to start in particular?
Obviously, bail reform is a hot topic. Maybe we save that for the end so that people stick around.
Yeah.
But the Mass Casualty Commission is a good one to start with.
Yeah.
The commissioners themselves, I believe, are supposed to come up with their final report March 31st. Mm-hmm. So we're still waiting a little bit, and we just thought we'd be proactive and submit some of the recommendations that we think they should be considering as far as we go.
So when you know what, there's been a few inquiries and commissions lately on all kinds of things, but when they start doing these processes, who's analyzing all the data on your behalf? And then, how do you come up with your recommendations? And the reason I'm asking is because I went on their website and it is literally hundreds of documents with tens of thousands of pages. And they have some pretty cool stuff. Like they're talking about the whole history of firearms in Canada. And someone did a massive study. Like I didn't know half of these things were a part of it. I don't even get to watch, 99% of what's been on TV even. But just the sheer volume. So how do you guys at the NPF kind of take all that in and formulate it into recommendations?
Good question. The best answer I can give you is some really, really dedicated people on our staff. We've got an excellent media relations department, a very committed government relations and policy department. And then obviously lead counsel for us that we engaged in mid 2021 in order to prepare for it, who were actually on the ground. And like any trial, if you will, they and their staff went through a lot of the disclosure and it voluminous, like thousands and thousands of documents. And some didn't even come to light until after the proceedings had concluded. There was so much of it. So it's just too much stuff. So really, it was just a human resource crunch, and being able to have that capacity was what we were able to do.
So does the NPF, were you sitting in, did you have a representative at every single one of these individual events or trials or whatever was taking place?
Yes and no. There were some, obviously, Nasha and her team as our counsel on the ground with our intervener status or participant status. They were invited, and we were invited to participate in every session when they convened. We didn't do so because obviously, Nasha and Kelly would make the decision. Well, today is a roundtable on reforming the justice system for social supports. Mm-hmm. Does that really impact us and the RCMP service delivery model? Not necessarily. So they would choose to, work in their office or something else and not be there in person. And similarly, from our staff perspective, we made a point of being there whenever any one of our members was actually going to be in a roundtable or on a witness panel or giving evidence. But we didn't actually have people there for every day of the proceedings.
Yeah. So I mainly asked that just to kind of get like a picture of how collaborative of a process it is. Because I always wonder, they say, hey, these people are going to be a part of it. Do they really listen? Do they really allow you in the room? So that's the main reason I'm kind of asking. So it sounds like the NPF has a big part in it. And I get what you're saying there. Does this one event really involve us? We don't need to be a part of it. So, but overall, it seems like a pretty good process and recommendations are going to come out.
I think the one thing that we didn't expect was how, witness testimony, regardless of who the witness was, became a bit of theater, and more. It's very public versus a lot of wrongful death inquiries or coroner's inquiry requests, which are in a room, not necessarily webcast. And you can still go on their webpage today, and you can look at all of the webcasts. So you can be on vacation in Mexico or in Germany and following along and binge watching the proceedings. So I don't think we expected or anticipated how public all of this was going to be. And that's obviously a challenge for the members and the families who are impacted from that, because it's just a reopening and a reliving and a retelling again and again and again.
Yeah, almost with every single person that gets up there.
Yes.
They're telling overlapping stories. I couldn't imagine just how, I guess, re-traumatizing that could be. So, especially for the members and the family that were there. Maybe if we move into like some of the recommendations that the NPF, so you've been proactive in putting these recommendations out. Is this document available to everybody yet or no?
I believe it's available on our novaScotia.ca webpage. Okay. And we did proactively do some media on this, sending it out to different media outlets because, again, with this mass casualty commission, talking about the theater and talking about the public nature of it. And I don't blame anyone or any of the participants, right? Because there is, in a typical criminal proceeding, there is a perp walk, there's a trial, someone might go to jail, and then you end up with an inquiry afterwards. In this situation, right, mass murder, worst one in Canadian history, there is no trial. Mm-hmm. So there's no bad guy that's actually going to do a perp walk or stand up in court or do whatever. So it became a little bit about, and again, I'm not blaming. I think it's part of the closure and the grief process. It became a little bit about finger pointing and finding someone to wear the shame and the blame. Mm-hmm. So we have tried to be a little bit about bringing it back to ground. Why are we here? What are we looking for? It's all about the future, not necessarily the past, knowing that the past is going to impact the future. So hence why you see in our recommendations, most of it is based on some of the weaknesses we've seen in the response, some of the weaknesses we see in policing in Nova Scotia, mm-hmm. And how the government, both federal and provincial, and different municipal ones can actually have a positive impact to improve public safety.
Yeah, you know what? I think you got a very good point right at the end there, especially about the feds, the provincial and municipal sides of things working together. Especially nowadays, everything is so divisive and everybody's just quick to say whatever the other person is doing, whether it's right or wrong, is wrong. And everyone's jumping down everyone's throats. When you have an event like this, you need true collaboration. You need people to listen and truly give a crap about what's going on here. So, and one of the things you were talking about was like resourcing and funding. So that's all in the recommendations. As I said, there was about 28 recommendations. I kind of generalized them into about 5 different things I was seeing. So maybe we could talk about funding by the provinces, because this is one thing that wasn't super clear to me. At least I've never been aware of this, but the cost recovery portion of it and what per officer cost is. So I guess, can you explain how the provinces are funding members and where maybe that kind of affects your staffing?
Yeah. So, I mean, the recommendation that we discontinue the idea of per officer funding formula as a basis for cost recovery is traditionally in Nova Scotia, obviously there's a provincial police service agreement where the RCMP is the provincial police for the province of Nova Scotia. All communities under 5,000 residents actually have the RCMP provided to them, paid for by the province. If you're between 5,000 and 15,000, then there's a cost sharing formula, usually 70% paid by the province and 30%, 70% paid by the municipality, 30% paid by the province or the federal government. And then as soon as you get over that 15,000 threshold, then you end up in a 90-10 cost sharing formula, 90% paid by the municipality and 10% paid by the province or the feds. But what has happened over the last 2 to 3 decades, and you see in a lot of the testimony from the commanding officers, is that municipalities might be authorized for 5 police officers, but they choose to keep one position vacant because they want to save a little bit of money. So they tell the province, we only want 4, and we're only paying for 4, even though they're authorized for 5. And, Bible Hill Detachment, which did the primary response to Porter Peak, they were actually authorized for 6, and they only funded 4. So they've always only had 4 available, and everybody got used to having 4, and you work your shifts around it, you call in overtime and such. So, we're just sitting back and saying, let's eliminate that practice, and the province should be able to say, we have 970-ish police officers for the PPSA. We are deploying them as we see fit. If you have 5 positions, you're getting 5 bodies.
So basically holding people to the standard, right? A minimum standard.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and, it's like you can't really run your car and it's got all the check engine lights on. And you're like, I'm just going to keep running and see what happens. And then it dies on you halfway out in the middle of nowhere. Well, what'd you expect? At some point, it's coming back to bite you. So, it's always a budget thing. But at what point does the dollars and cents kind of overtake the safety of the community? So I guess the communities or the decision makers kind of got to wear that a bit.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, you've probably seen it in Edmonton. I know we've seen it in all sorts of jurisdictions across Canada where the mandate of the police officer has grown over the last 15 to 20 years because other social services have shrunk. So we're asking our cops to do more, but we're actually not even staffing them to the level that they should in order to provide their baseline level of service. So it's a bigger discussion, but hence why we hope that these commissioners actually take notice on this particular issue and go forward.
Well, maybe I'll kind of just switch gears a little bit on this since you have this last comment here. But once these recommendations are made, who pushes them forward? Who brings them to life? And in the meantime, I guess, who keeps it going? Like saying, hey, this isn't done yet. What's going on?
Well, I think that's going to fall to us for a lot of things. Internally within the RCMP, we'll be advocating for recommendations that make sense that have come out of this commission. We also have fairly strong federal lobby arm. We deal a lot with the Minister of Public Safety, Treasury Board of Canada, et cetera. So we'll be advocating there. But I also hope that the RCMP itself and the province of Nova Scotia themselves will proactively implement a lot of the recommendations that come forward. And they have done so already, not knowing what's going to come out, right? So, for example, there's been some discussion about policing standards in Nova Scotia. In April 2020, the Police Service Act didn't have clear-cut standards for a police service, right? Since that mass casualty event and as the Mass Casualty Commission was ongoing, the province engaged with different police services to talk about what adequate standards look like. And those are already in the works, and they were ready to be published, but I think they've held off until April now.
Yeah.
So there has been some work that's already been ongoing, which is good.
And you know what, from my own experience and seeing when major events happen, even in the municipal service side of things or the RCMP side, sometimes you start to get some of that compliance with the recommendations. And then just as time goes on, it seems like they kind of wane and they just die off. So I don't envy your job. I mean, like some of these recommendations, I mean, they need a lot of people to approve things, to get on board. But I mean, they could take a year or longer. So it's you got to really stay on top of those. One of the things that I found very surprising was when it came to the resourcing was the air support that they had. So it was at the time of the shootings, there was one helicopter and one airplane available, but for different reasons, neither one was able to get up in the air. But they only, for the entire Maritimes, there's only the one place that they come out of. Was I reading that correct?
Moncton, yeah. The entire RCMP Air Services for Atlantic Canada works out of Moncton. And obviously, from yourself and myself, all my services in the lower mainland of BC, it's kind of big city policing. I think we grow up seeing, well, hey, there's a helicopter available, there's a plane available, we want to do surveillance, we can go up in a plane, or we want to chase a stolen car, we can call a helicopter. That's not the case in Atlantic Canada, and again, it goes back to the response to the 18th and 19th of April. The RCMP, with respect to air support, I mean, they did everything right. They were just hamstrung with the resources that they had available to them. And to the point where they were calling Joint Rescue Command, trying to get one of the CAS planes up in the air, and they basically said, yeah, we don't fly at night, sorry, thanks. To moving to Montreal's air services saying, how quickly can you get a helicopter here? So back to how much resources do you have? Have you planned for the worst and hope for the best? Or have we gotten into this cycle of complacency, living in a safe community, and we're going to scale back budgets on air services? Because it didn't used to just be one helicopter and one plane. There were actually more resources available about 10 years ago. It's just they got scaled back through budget cuts.
Well, that goes back to the thing we were just talking about, where even the number of officers that they're authorized to have, but what they choose to fund. It's like, oh, nothing happened this week, cut a person. Nothing happened the next week, just cut another person, save money where you can. But then when the big one happens, like you're saying, you got to prepare for the worst, hope for the best. Yeah, you definitely see that there. One of the things too was on the tactical unit that was available. So is the Maritimes, do they have a full-time tactical team, or is it just a part-time?
So at the time, it was a hybrid in Nova Scotia. And again, back to there have been improvements made already. You know, the emergency response team has already moved forward to an almost full-time team. You know, they had, I'm trying to remember the exact numbers, it was either 7 or 8 full-time positions, and then another 7 or 8 part-time to make up a full team of 16. Since, you know, April 18th, 19th, 2020, into the Mass Casualty Commission, you know, the province has approved funding for a full-time team, and they're just in the process of actually staffing up all of those 18 positions. So, yeah, it was a hybrid, and obviously you don't get the best 24/7, 365 coverage for the entire province, mind you. We're not just talking about one town with members all over the place, because with the hybrid, and when I started my service, we had part-time emergency response teams from the Lower Mainland. And as much as I love the fact of having a part-time ERT member in a patrol car responding to calls with me, and you can learn from their experience and their tactical awareness, I think communities, and we've gotten to a place now where we definitely need those dedicated deployments. And the abilities for them to come at will. So it's getting better.
So speaking on that too, I guess maybe we'll move into the provincial policing standards, and I guess this will touch a bit on even the idea of like a federal standard. So when it comes to like uses of force, can you kind of give me like what's your opinion on whether you have a provincial standard or a federal standard, maybe where one is overstepping its bounds? You know, what's kind of your opinion on these different places, and even having a college to that effect?
Yeah, I don't know. So, you know, federally speaking, obviously the RCMP has some fairly good standards. You know, comparatively speaking, some municipal or provincial police agencies might be better than us or not as good as us in different areas, like, you know, use of force framework, mandatory recertification, training, rollout of this use of force equipment or this piece of equipment or such. But I think federally we're pretty good. You know, when the province in Nova Scotia is really talking about standards, I think what they're talking about is, well, the way I understand it is, if you're going to have a police service, whether it's one cop or 500, doesn't matter, here's what you must meet in order to comply under the Police Act. And that means, you know, you have to have an emergency response team, and that emergency response team must be comprised of this. You must be able to have a critical incident package, and that critical incident package has these things. You must have access to some form of air support, and that air support must have this. And then if you can't, like, you know, the police agency of one constable or one chief constable, for example, then you have to have some form of agreement with your neighbor to provide those services and show how you're going to pay your neighbor for the rental or use of those services. So that's really where the province of Nova Scotia is going. You know, police college across Canada, interesting idea. I don't know if the provinces would actually buy in, right? Because obviously police service acts are different all the way across Canada. There's all, you know, the Ontario Police Service Act and the Training Academy in Ontario, Quebec with Nicolet, and Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and all those places each are unique. So policing is provincially regulated as far as the service delivery. I think we can do better about how all those chiefs come to an agreement about the minimum standard they're willing to teach to in those colleges and those training. But, would it be one college? I think it was Finland that went to a degree program. You need to have a diploma or degree or 2 years before you can actually apply to a police service. And then there's a 2 to 3 year probationary period before you actually get in. And different, smaller country, different world. So, not sure.
I think it's an interesting idea. I think there's a lot of good that could come out of it. There's also a lot of questions I would have around it. Definitely for bigger brains than me to figure out. But I thought, just having national standards, I don't know if that's the greatest idea when it comes to policing and just saying a one-size-fits-all approach.
Mm-hmm.
We already see this with a lot of provinces pushing back on certain things, trying to, work on their sovereignty from the federal side of things to an extent. So, but I thought, well, what if you incentivized having a police college by, you come out with a trade or something else. You're, and also if you're considered a professional by whatever standards, you've obtained this, degree there. I thought it was kind of a unique idea. Maybe that's something that they look at. I know that's been written about a few times, but I guess we'll see what that's like. But I remember going through Depot, and when people would come out and get posted to BC, they still had to go do a few weeks at their institute. So is that something that maybe would be acceptable to expand to other provinces, or?
Yeah, possible. I mean, in British Columbia, really, the unique thing about BC is the emergency vehicle operations policy is different, or at least it was 10 to 15 years ago, than it is in the rest of Canada as far as what they teach at Depot in Regina. So there is that portion of it, and then different resources available. Mm-hmm. In BC, just because of the capacity that the RCMP has, especially in the Lower Mainland. And like I said, it's pretty much big city policing that we don't do most of the rest of Canada. So,
yeah, it's almost, and that's kind of speaks to why I'm saying, I don't know if a national standard would fit. Everybody's got different budgets. Everybody's got a different amount of money, different populations. So, one of the things too that, speaking of money, came out of your recommendations were the equipment. So I didn't realize that there's still vehicles without a computer in them, police cars without a computer.
Yep.
So that was kind of surprising. But you were talking about just in general, better technology. So GPS of vehicles or people, computers in cars. So do you want to maybe comment on some of that?
Yeah, no, I don't know if we were unclear on this, but maybe it's because we lived through the Mass Casualty Commission. But when we're talking about vehicles without computers, obviously we're talking about the plainclothes, unmarked detective type surveillance cars, or a dog handler not having a full complement in there because there just isn't enough room with the kennels, the cage, and such in the back, or the tactical armored vehicle that the emergency response team is using. But so in addition to making sure that all vehicles have the capacity to be outfitted, tactically, obviously, you don't necessarily want your surveillance vehicles with a laptop in them or a big GPS puck on the roof. But beyond that is embracing modern technology. And, the RCMP is about to roll out body-worn cameras. So modern technology and body-worn cameras is the capacity to have GPS on there. So you can actually be in the command center with a screen up, and you can see from the GPS on the body-worn cameras where all your members are. Mm-hmm. And as a commander, incident commander, you can actually turn on each individual body-worn camera remotely to see what that member is seeing. So there is that capacity as we roll out body-worn cameras. Don't know if it's going to be to that extent, but also there's the ATAC system, GPS-enabled ability to put into phones or radios to do something similar. So again, you're back in that, you got to think from a command perspective. I want to deploy my resources. I kind of want to know where 2 Bravo 15 is and 3 Bravo 11, right? So I can see them on the screen as they're moving in to the other place. Because what we saw in the Mass Casualty Commission was there were 3 members coming in an IARD formation to clear a certain area, but then there were also members who were actually trying to come out. So they wanted,
Oh, okay. You're going to get a blue on blue.
Yeah. So no, and it was so like that. I've seen pictures of it, like it is black as black could be out there.
Yeah.
That night. So do you actually know that rustling in the woods is the bad guy, or is it whatever? And do you want to yell at them to give away your position, knowing the bad guy's still out there? So it's really about embracing that technology so that the commander can really deploy and tell everybody where everybody is.
I think as a frontline guy right now, I would, the first thought that came to my mind was the commander's just going to be, watching all the little pawns moving around the board and just being like, you take 5 steps this way and you look this way. And it's just going to, hopefully it doesn't turn into a giant micromanaging session. It's kind of my fear, but that's up to the training and the commanders.
Yeah. And, obviously I hope a lot of good is going to come out of these recommendations at the Mass Casualty, because, from what I know, unless you've followed along, those 3 initial IARD members going in and then subsequently the ERT team coming in to try and get them out, like they were walking into what's described as kind of an active war zone. And mainly because the perpetrator had a garage that was filled with just thousands of rounds of ammunition. And then obviously he set fire to that. So as these members are going in trying to search, they're hearing rounds go off.
Jeez.
And it's so black.
Yeah.
You don't know if someone's actually actively shooting.
Yeah.
Or if it's right. So that was the real nobody knew, what was actually going on, and how do you make sure your members are safe.
So one of the last things I was going to try to get to on the Casualty Commission side of things was you talk a lot about the supports for members and families. And a lot of that stuff, I guess, from the way I read it, a lot of that was downloaded onto the service or the NPF to kind of pick up the pieces afterward. So was the recommendation that the government starts some sort of program and picks up where that is? Or are you looking to just have more funding on your side to deal with that?
Well, I think, yes, a lot of it was downloaded to the NPF, but I think we have to, and I kick myself because in hindsight, we could have done so much better. That being said, April 2020, we had been really in existence for 4 months, fully fledged. So, didn't necessarily have the resources to be able to mitigate or put on the ground there. But thinking back, there are ways we could have done better. But I think what came here was the family liaison officers. There were some weaknesses identified in that program through the RCMP. Normally next of kin notifications, guidance through the criminal process, the investigations and such, and updates for victims and families. In this case, they assigned 1, sometimes 2 in total for all 22 families. And that's just a massive burden, especially when there's actually no real training that we give to our members about trauma-informed approach and discussions and conversations. So let's figure out how we can do that better, because we can definitely do better on the family liaison side. And then I think internally from the RCMP side, I think the CO of the day did okay after the fact, realizing that, here's 150 members that were involved in the initial response to really ugly, terrible crime scenes, and then following up at the 13, 14, 15 different crime scenes over the months-long investigation. So I think she did okay requesting resources coming in from other provinces to complement those members being able to be away from work for a month, 2 weeks, whatever, to decompress, get care and stuff. However, there were some hurdles in actually getting approval for that care for those members, mainly because we don't really have any kind of formalized process for that. And I don't think anybody expected something this big to happen. So it's really about let's rethink how we talk to members and families after critical incidents, so that we can implement some best practices about taking care of the families, make sure they're up to date and all, and in a respectful and professional manner. But two, realize that this has an impact on just not only the 911 operator, but the member driving to, attending, and follow up afterwards. And how do we make sure that we take care of them as well?
Yeah, well, and you think for every member there could be a spouse, there's kids, a whole bunch of other people that might need some help out of this whole event. So do you foresee that being maybe one of the easier pieces to kind of pick up on? I would imagine that, especially in today's climate, I feel like that should be almost not a quick fix, but like maybe a bit of an easier fix, like for people to start going down that road, providing those kind of services.
I hope so. The RCMP has done some good things in the mental health world and breaking down the barriers and stigma. But we also have to recognize that in Nova Scotia, for example, or even New Brunswick or neighboring PEI, it's all smaller communities.
Mm-hmm.
So the members from Bible Hill that responded here, right, they're known to the community members. People know where they live. So we have to sit back and say, okay, if there's a massive impact, wherever it might be, right, do we need to do an assessment of perhaps moving that member and their family out of the community so that they can get some this and that and whatever? Because otherwise, you might have Fred at the grocery store calling Mary, the member, just, names and reliving it and all that great stuff. So, it's just a global perspective, knowing some of the unique challenges that the RCMP members face.
Do you know where, there's a lot of members involved in this, but do you know where some of them are now? Like, is everybody still just working in their units where they were, or have a bunch of them been moved, or maybe even quit the service altogether?
I know a few of them have retired. Some of the incident commanders and some of the more senior folk, even a couple of the junior ones did retire.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them have chosen to stay in Nova Scotia because they just love Nova Scotia and Nova Scotians. Some have moved on to different units, or transferred out to New Brunswick, different places across the country. But the majority of them are actually still there, and working in different communities.
Okay. Maybe we'll move on to the recruiting side of things.
Sure. Yeah.
So, one of the things that we were going to get to here was the changes that have come to recruiting experienced officers. So, can you talk a bit about I guess it was a new agreement or a letter of understanding? Is maybe the proper terminology?
Yeah, and honestly, this goes back to our first collective agreement that we negotiated back August 2021. In the end, post ratification of that agreement, with experienced police officers were continued to be coming into the RCMP, but we saw that, we forgot about that sort of kind of thing, because they were coming to us and saying, hey, I've got 10 years with, Regina, and I just patched over to the RCMP. But for my holidays, they're treating me like I've only got 1 year of service.
Mm.
So that's a disincentive, obviously, for someone to come over as an experienced police officer. You want to recognize their seniority. So we brought it to the commissioner, we brought it to Treasury Board of Canada. Both of them were like, oh, yeah, duh. So we worked through it and ultimately came to a modification of the collective agreement, this MOA for experienced police officers. So now that same 10-year member can walk into the RCMP and have 10 years of service for their holidays, which is, I think, a greater incentive for attracting experienced police officers.
For experienced officers, does the pay transfer over as well based on your years?
Yes and no. So you come in as a first class constable. There's no, like most, you start as a fourth or fifth class constable and work your way up. So you do come in as a first class constable. What would be, and different police services have it differently, whether it's a 369 or a 4-8-12 retention pay or service pay or something, that doesn't come over with you. So if you came from the OPP, for example, and you're at the 6% service level, you're only coming in as a first class constable.
Okay.
And then you would have to, you work into our own retention salary bonus, which starts from 0.
Okay. And I know a lot of people have kind of talked about this too, is when you apply as an experienced officer, when you're going through the process, are you given your detachment or your posting ahead of time, and then you can kind of make a decision like, I'm going to see this through and go through all the training and switch over so I know where I'm going, where I'm moving the family? Or does that come way later and you're kind of just hoping for the best?
Yes and no. So yes, I would encourage anyone who's considering it to obviously reach out. Postings and deployments, obviously, we can't negotiate them. They're residual management rights. How the RCMP chooses to deploy its resources is their purview. But I do know that the RCMP is open to saying, hey, I'm a member of, the Alberta Sheriffs. For example, my family lives in Calgary. My wife has a really good job there. My kids are in school. I don't necessarily want to move to Fort Vermilion. And then the RCMP is open to sitting down and discussing a pre-posting agreement to, maybe Airdrie or High River or Okotoks.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that they don't disrupt that family unit. Is that going to happen or be good for everybody? I don't know. So, but they're open for the discussion, and if someone's thinking about it, ask the question and see where it goes.
All right. And maybe we'll kind of move on here just to bail reform.
Oh yeah,
because I'm very curious about this. Unless, did you have anything else? Did we miss anything else on even the mass casualty stuff that we want to make sure we get to?
No, mass casualty, really, a lot of our recommendations come down to money and being serious about policing in the province, right? It's just that big topic that nobody ever wants to talk about is, like I said earlier, if you want to, a lot of the witnesses, it's interesting, a lot of the experts internationally that came into a lot of the panels, bluntly said, there will be another mass casualty.
Yeah.
So prepare for it. And hence why we're sitting back and saying, in order to prepare for this stuff, here's some of the things that we see. And it's not just Nova Scotia. Like the next one might be in Saskatchewan. We saw the James Smith Cree First Nation.
Yes.
Stabbing challenges there. So how do we globally as Canadians look at preparing ourselves for what might happen next?
Yeah. Well, moving on to, I guess, maybe bail reform kind of fits into that.
It does.
So do you want to talk about maybe we'll start with lobbying and how did this kind of come up? Where are we at? And what is bail reform? Like, how do you even get this process started?
Well, it's already started. And then, I had a meeting last week with an MP, conservative justice critic or chair of the Justice Committee meeting. I've been invited to a meeting this week with the Minister of Public Safety, kind of a roundtable to talk about ideas around bail reform. And again, I think a lot of people are pointing the finger at the feds, but also ignoring their provincial responsibilities. So it is a whole of government, provinces and feds, that actually need to be on board for everything. So, what can the feds do? And some of the things that we've spoken about already is, let's pick the low-hanging fruit and work in a stepped capacity, reverse onus.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so firearms offense, now it's a reverse onus for you to get bail.
Yeah.
Right? That's an easy one. Different things about the James Smith Cree First Nation, for example. The offender there was on statutory release,
mm-hmm.
and had his statutory release revoked, and there was a warrant out. So how do we do better? Is statutory release still something that Canadians want? Finish 2/3 of your federal sentence and you're at the door no matter how bad you were in prison. Okay, let's look at that. That's low-hanging fruit.
What? And sorry, I think just on stat release too.
Yeah.
There's no charge, right? And was that not part of the discussion? It was like, well, how come there's no new charge if you're breaching that part of it? So
yeah, you just go back and finish what's left of your sentence, right? So nothing new. I mean, unless you commit a new offense, then an entire new thing. The other low-hanging fruit that I think that we were bandying about was 25 years. Okay, so 25 years before you can apply for parole, or 14 years before you can apply for parole. Are those numbers still relevant today? Right? They came in, in the early 80s, late 70s, the previous Trudeau. Life expectancies doubled or gone up considerably since then. So a life sentence is 25 years for parole, actually still something that Canadians still appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
Or is it a simple amendment to make that 40, right? Or 35?
Yeah.
Which, these are like low-hanging fruit things. And we saw that one with the Justin Bourque case. If you remember Moncton, 2014, he killed 3 of ours, injured 2 more.
Mm-hmm.
And the judge of the day stacked his life sentences. So he wasn't eligible to apply for parole for 75 years.
Yeah.
And since then, that law has been struck down. So you can't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And he has now applied to the Provincial Court of Appeal in New Brunswick to have his sentence modified so he can apply for parole in 25 years. I doubt he'll ever get parole, but just the fact that he can apply for it or could apply for it is probably offensive.
Yeah, and especially when it comes to like murder charges and the people doing 25 years, I wonder where they kind of get their the lawmakers get their thought process from, because I'm thinking on one hand, if I'm the family, I go, well, my loved one is gone forever. You could be back out in 25-ish years, depending on a host of factors, but you get to go back and have some sort of life, some version of it after you're out. So kind of like you're saying, people live longer now, maybe 25, maybe we need to look at changing that number. Never know. Maybe they'll just decrease it. Maybe they'll put it to 10. Like, who knows nowadays?
Yeah.
But I just kind of wonder, like, how come, why is 25, this number, where did that come from? What's the history behind that? And then why can't someone do 75 years? And I read the thing there, was that the judge was saying, like, it didn't leave the door open for rehabilitation. But again, it's like, at some point you decide to take somebody's life and they're gone forever. So what's a reasonable time frame in the society's mind, I guess?
Yeah, and I think, obviously the 25 and the 14, from my understanding, came in when they abolished the death penalty, and at the time that was what was deemed to be an appropriate sentence without being able to apply for parole. But times change, right? And people evolve. Some of the other discussions we had were, and I don't know if you've seen it, but there's the province of BC did a report. It's called a rapid investigation into violent stranger attacks. So I can send you the link.
Yeah.
But within that, what they found, they did their study throughout the period of COVID. And what they found was that judges were Crown Counsel and judges were not ordering pretrial custodial sentences. So you're not remanded because we don't want you to get COVID in a fully packed institution. So they were sending them back out into the community with more stringent conditions. And then once vaccines and mandates and all that stuff were listed, the trend continued. So the argument that we don't have enough jail cells, especially for pretrial sentences or custody, is not there, at least in British Columbia. So changing the mindset of crowns and judges that they do have openings in provincial correctional institutions for people to go to while they await trial. And they should be, perhaps, in those more serious cases, be sending people for pretrial custody. So that was interesting, and that's why I say it's not just a federal thing, right?
Yeah.
The provincial court judges and the provinces actually kind of need to be on board. And then there's Jordan, obviously. That whole challenge of getting cases to trial in the 18 to 30 months. And does that mean more Crown prosecutors, better administration, more judges? I have no idea. But, part of the reason that you see so many plea deals now is because we need to expedite this off our plate. So you plead guilty to X and we'll get rid of Y and Z. Thank you very much. Case closed. Off she goes.
Or things are thrown out altogether, and like serious crimes.
Yeah,
we're getting serious ag assaults, and things are getting just tossed. Murder's been tossed now.
Yeah,
because hasn't gotten to trial in time, which is it's crazy.
Yeah, so I think there's a balancing act here between the rights of the accused and the rights of the community, and which one has greater weight. And I think any cop will tell you that over the last 20, 25 years, more weight has been given to the rights of the accused, and the rights of the community has been forgotten. So now it's really good to see that whether it be the premiers, the federal government, or whatever, are starting to look at the rights of the community and how they've been disregarded and can make it right? And all keeping in mind that those accused, they still have rights.
Yeah, but getting back to the original victim of the crime and, who we're here to protect. So, I think that's a good place to kind of wrap it there. We're just shy of an hour, so that went quick. I appreciate you taking the time to jump on here for a third time. I'm going to start having to put a seat in here with your name on it. So we'll have to get you in here one day.
When do I get my frequent flyer card?
Yeah.